Hi, friends. In terms of communication, of course, we've looked at elements like using internal blogs. Looked at elements which deals with various aspects of communicating in the workplace, the barriers to communication. Okay, and then the digital communication tools we can always think of. Okay, but one thing I want us to also consider is let's deal with other nitty-gritty details of communication, especially in digital communication or even in formal workplace communication scenarios. Okay, so I'm going to share my slide, and this one will cover the last segment of this particular topic on leading and managing teams. And it cuts across two chapters of the core text, chapters number 7 and 8, chapters 7 and 8. So we are dealing with two elements, okay, two dimensions of our course, two chapters of the course. So one key thing we can think of is data visualization. Okay, it goes beyond a simple representation of charts and tables in Excel. Okay, instead, this data visualization deals with where we can normally represent complex data sets in a visually appealing and accessible way. So sometimes in 3D formats, where we could manipulate and use the data to achieve organizational objectives in terms of communicating key ideas and key concepts. So today, you could normally see the use of Tableau and Click, and they help a lot. Okay, there are more you can also think of where you can normally use these complex data sets or visualize representation of data in a complex way to meet the needs of the organization. The finance team will need it, the IT guys will need it, data scientists will always use this to represent it. Normally, they are user friendly. They speak a lot. Today, people could even use Visio to represent data in a very clever way. Okay, that's what we see nowadays. Okay, now let's move on from data visualization. So it's one of the key ways we can communicate key concepts, key ideas in the organizational settings and communicate our ideas. Meetings take place every now and then to promote some form of um, organizational points, key points we want to communicate to members of the staff or to even people outside the staff to communicate with internal and external stakeholders. They are very effective methods for the manager, and to ensure that it is very effective, we are always told that let us follow these following steps. One, we are being told that the successful meetings are normally, that's a rule of thumb. The successful meetings are normally 80% preparation and 20% execution. That's a rule of thumb for all successful meetings. But whenever you want to make your meetings effective, always determine the purpose of the meeting. Very important. Establish who should attend and who shouldn't attend. It is always important to draft an agenda in advance. Seek the inputs of the members who will attend the meeting so that you can include it or incorporate it in the agenda. And also make suitable arrangement for the time and location of the meeting. Make sure you start on time, make sure you end on time. And who will be the chair to facilitate the discussion? Who will be the clerk to take minutes of the discussions? Okay. Plan an action plan, manage an action plan or put in place an action plan to ensure that any decisions taken in the meetings are what are implemented. We know who is doing what. Summarize the meeting in the form of minutes and publish these results to members of the team. Okay. In that case, you know that the team or the meeting will become successful. Remember, team members will take on various roles on the meeting. Some will be protagonists who are positive supporters of the team, and some could be what antagonists who challenge the status quo and who will bring in their diverse ideas or views onto the meeting platform. It is important we tolerate all of this. Some meetings I have sat on have become like one-sided. If you challenge it, you become an antagonist. You are seen as an evil person. Okay, but that should be the beauty of a successful meeting. We should get protagonists and we should get antagonists. At the end of the day, we are not fighting, we are not killing each other. We are bringing different ideas to make the workplace a better place. Okay, but unfortunately, people come in with their own ideas, with their own thoughts, and think they should be listened to. No one else should be listened to. There are some problems we always encounter when we hold in meetings. If you don't get the right chairperson to head to facilitate the discussions, we are doomed. If you don't get the right chairperson who will be willing to accept ideas, normally the chairperson should be the last to speak. After he or she has collected all ideas, he gives a final verdict. It makes a lot of sense. Again, when with the objectives of the meeting are not clear, undefined, we all come and try to think we want to say something, we are doomed. We are doomed. We should always make sure we have clear-cut agenda, clear-cut defined functions and roles of the meeting so that you don't come in and just postulate anything at all, but you come in to articulate the ideas, the objectives of the meeting. If there is lack of enthusiasm or interest in the meeting, we are doomed. We should come in with some zeal and some enthusiasm to ensure that we are coming to do something or to deliberate on action points that will help the organization meet its objectives. Attendees talk too much without regard to the chairperson. Give credence to the chairperson who is steering the activities. Don't talk too much. Just go straight to the point, highlight your main points, and that's it. Okay? When chairperson cuts you, please respect the status quo. It is assumed that the chairperson will apply common judgment and will ensure that he's not biased to ensure that everybody speaks his or her mind accurately, not to interject when somebody is making a key point. Okay? Now, again, attendees cannot reach an agreement concerning issues on the agenda. That will be a problem. If we cannot all vote by majority consensus or majority take, and it is just give and take and no idea, no conclusion is drawn, then this will be a problem. Okay. So mostly you see meetings will have votes. I'm a clerk. I'm a secretary to some boards. So normally I know what I'm talking about. We always have to come to a decision, we vote, and we draw a conclusion. Now the action points from the previous meeting should always be carried out. If they've not been carried out, then what's the purpose of us holding subsequent meetings? Now, the minutes should not be too long and should not be too brief. This becomes complex depending on the nature of the meeting. If it is a meeting that has lasted for 6 hours, I've started on a meeting that lasted for 6 hours. You don't expect the minutes to be brief. It will be long. I've sat on emergency meetings which will last for just 15, 20 minutes. Then you don't expect this to also be um, long. It will be too brief. Okay, just one or couple of few lines, and that's it. You are gone. Okay. So it depends on the nature of the meeting that would determine whether the minutes are long or they are short. Okay. Now, how do we influence and persuade? Before we move on, I will ask you to look at page 289 of the core text. There is a question there, which is a case style study question on PQR's experiencing significant success over the last year and rapidly expanding. And if it go on and on, it tells you that they need a consultant who should advise them on how to improve these areas. Write a report for B for the company discussing the problems which have been experienced in the monthly meetings and then suggest what should be done to make future meetings more productive. Okay. I'll be happy if you could look at this area. Okay. Now again, in any workplace, when you're managing relationships at the workplace, you need to influence somebody. Put yourself in the shoes of a manager. You need to persuade somebody. Okay. Now, influence, we are being told, looks at the ability to impact somebody's opinion, idea, and attitude. Okay. So you want to influence somebody. You want to change somebody's attitude. Okay. But persuasion, on the other hand, deals with that deliberate attempt to get others to change, to think, to have an opinion or a behavior like you want it to be. Okay. So in the first place, influence, you have the ability to change. Persuasion, you apply that ability to deliberately cause someone to think the way you want the person to think, to act the way you want somebody to act. Okay. Then negotiation in itself deals with where you discuss an issue, more or less give and take, so that you reach a good agreement. Okay. Now, in terms of influence, we're looking at reciprocity, okay, commitment and consistency. We're looking at social proof. We're looking at liking, authority, and scarcity. Okay, these are quite detailed. I want you to take a look at it in the text. Okay, now Robert Cialdini in his book, I think he published this book sometime in um, not too sure of the date, but it's a prominent book which was recently published. Now, in his book, he mentioned the book is titled "The Psychology of Persuasion." Psychology of Persuasion. Now, that is where he linked it to these six key themes, principles coming out from the element of influence. One, it says in terms of reciprocity, human nature can lead us to feel obliged to return favors. I influence you today. Tomorrow you influence me. Okay. So I'm tempted to influence someone to seek his support. Why? Because in the past he's done something to influence me as well. Commitment and consistency says that as humans, we desire consistency and we don't like to be seen to be changing our minds. Okay. So we may be influenced to follow through with our support for something if we had shown some partial interest in it in the past. Influence. Okay. Social proof deals with the principle that humans need to be influenced by peer pressure. Social. Okay. So peer pressure. So if we see others acting in a certain way, then it is likely we will also act in the same way. Influence. Okay. Then we have liking on the fact that we are more likely to be influenced by people we like than those we don't like. Okay. So those who are nice to us, who are friendly, who are supportive towards us, we want to we easily like to follow them, to be influenced by them. Okay. Or those who are like us. Okay. Then authority, another principle that Cialdini's book mentioned was that it's on the premise that we are more likely to be influenced by people who are in positions of authority easily. Okay. We just want to kowtow because of the charisma. And then scarcity deals with the principle that we are likely to want something if its availability is limited. Okay. So we are more likely to support something if we fear that we'll lose it out. We'll lose out if we don't support it. Okay. So those are the elements um, of influence which Cardini mentioned. Again, if you take the text, it gives you further examples on an expanded text on these six principles, and I would strongly recommend that you take a look at it. And persuasion, like I said, you directly, intentionally, deliberately want to influence somebody. Okay, you're using that influence to deliberately change somebody's character, opinion, or behavior. Okay. All right. Then negotiation, like I said, give and take so that we all come to a compromise. Okay, give and take so that we can all come to a compromise. Now, in terms of negotiation, we are given three normal themes that come up. We have, in terms of, it comprises two elements. It has two situational elements, and it involves two approaches. Okay, let's look at what it comprises. We have what we call the purposeful persuasion. What does it mean? Purposeful persuasion deals with creating the best argument and evidence to support the decision of each party. And you persuade the other of its case, okay, purposefully. So you find it in Judge and Ginard's book 2003. They are saying for purposeful, like the word sounds. I want to create the best argument with the aim, with the very purpose that I'll give you some evidence to support my stand so that possibly you can buy in. I can persuade you to buy in. Okay. Then we have constructive compromise. Okay. Constructive compromise deals with a situation that parties will identify a common ground. Where are the red lines? Which ones are less important issues on which compromises could be reached? So these are the two. Okay. So those are the two in terms of the compromises. Okay. Purposeful one and then the constructive compromise. Then we have the situations in which negotiations will normally take place. Two, okay? So we have the conflict resolution, where typically you will see conflict resolution occurring in situations we want to resolve, bring some peace, okay? So, of course, there could be some conflict of interest, but can somebody give up his or her conflicting stance to give in, okay, so that we can all um, get some peace. Okay. Then again, we're looking at group decision making and problem solving, where we all bring our heads together. Wisdom is not embedded in one person's head. At the end of the day, we come to a good compromise and then we solve the problem to the best interest of the organization. Now, the two main approaches to negotiation, okay, two main approaches to negotiation. We always want a win win situation. Wouldn't it be the best? Employer wins, employee wins, all stakeholders win. That should be the best approach. Okay. So we have the distributive bargaining, in which case it sees negotiation as a means to distribute scarce resources from the word distributive. Okay. To allocate scarce resources, each party will secure what is most important to them and they compromise somewhere. It is expected that this compromise that they're giving up will serve the best interest of the other. So you knock the two situations off and you get a zero sum equation. Again, I gain on the other end and I give up something. What I give up is what somebody will pick and gain, and he will give up something. What he gives up is what I pick and gain. So when we knock it off win-win situation, you get a zero sum equation. Okay. All right. Then we have the um, integrative bargaining, which also emphasizes more of the win-win situation, and it tries to also find solutions where no one will lose out. So it is a little bit different from the distributive where somebody gives up, but here I win totally, not necessarily giving up something, yet my other colleague will also win and he will not lose anything. So it is more constructive, sustainable, and ethical. Don't hurt someone. Okay. But how do you do it? Would you need to separate out maybe budget outcomes, spend a certain amount to help someone meet his needs? Or you look at the process of efficiency. For example, if there is a case where somebody is is hurt as a result of doing his work on the job, he needs some compensation. The organization doesn't have enough resources. What do? We bargain, give him some adequate compensation that will make him feel at peace in his heart. But at the same time, whatever we are giving to this person shouldn't compromise on our budgets. Instead, it should be something that could bring in some peace of mind to the worker, to the employer. Win-win. We all go out and live our peaceful lives. It happens normally in collective bargaining, okay, on CBAs, collective bargaining approaches in the workplace. All right, let's move on. What is the negotiating process? The negotiating process takes quite some beautiful steps over there. What you see on the slide is a little bit different from what you'll find in the text, but they all come to the same steps, okay, the same four stages, distinct stages in terms of the negotiation. Okay, one, we always have the preparation stage where we gather information. Okay, look at the background to the problem. What are the constraints each party or participant will face? That is the preparation. Then the second stage is the opening. So at this stage, we present our positions, our starting positions. I go ahead in the line of duty. Okay, the employer also comes. You should have worn protective gear. Everybody presents his or her starting position. It's a good point opportunity for us to influence the other party. Okay, then we have the bargaining. Here, we identify a common ground. Okay, we make concessions, we move together, we come on to agree. Okay, now the purpose here is to narrow the gap between the two parties. Okay, the initial two positions, and then to persuade one person of the strength of the case. Did you wear protective gear when you were supposed to wear protective equipment to do the work? Okay, so you're presenting your case. We are trying to bargain. We want to close the gap. Okay, and at the end of the day, we should use clearly thought out, planned, and logical debate. The fact that he didn't wear protective gear doesn't mean we should just write him off. Okay, we should look at areas where we could all win. Remember, negotiations should lead to a win-win situation, not a conflict situation. Then closing off. Okay, the closing off is where we all come to an agreement. Mutually, we all get some kind of benefit, and then we agree to close off the scenario. Okay, so that is it, beautifully thought out, and which makes sure it works. You can use some other approaches. Okay, we can all use some other approaches as well, but I'll leave this one there. Now, negotiations could be successful. Sometimes it doesn't lead to successful outcomes. Now, John Hans provided a list in his book Managing People at Work. John Hunt came up with this approach where he says that there are some features of a successful negotiation, or successful negotiators who spearhead the negotiation process. He said, avoid direct confrontation. Don't do that. You rather agitate people, you make people angry the more. If it's possible, consider a wide range of options we can leverage on so that everybody can pick what best suits them and we all come to a compromise. Now, when there are counter proposals, hold it back. Don't respond immediately. Wait. Weigh the pros and cons before you decide to accept either of the proposals or all of them. And again, use emollient verbal techniques. Would it be helpful if we give you this? If we adopt that? If we suggest this approach? Okay. So use techniques which will emotional. When we say emollient, it's like emotional intelligent verbal techniques. So it's some two words joined together. So we are supposed to use an emotional and an intelligent verbal technique to ensure that we all come to the same platform. Okay. Summarize on behalf of all involved. If you're a negotiator, summarize. Don't take one stance on both sides. Okay. And then make sure you end up advancing one single argument, insisting, okay, after you've actually done a good analysis and weighed the pros and cons. It is better to avoid long-winded, multiple reason arguments. You will just be wasting your time. All right. Okay. Conflict also resolve, like um, result in any workplace. Remember, there will always be one disagreement from the other. Somebody will not agree on what you are doing. If we all don't agree and there's conflict, it will be perceived that one person is preventing the organization from achieving its goals. But when conflicts occur at different forms, at different levels in the organization, what do we do? Okay, we have looked at group conflict in the previous controlling performance, right? But let's look at some other elements in terms of conflict symptoms that you could identify at the workplace, okay, which shows that there is some conflict emanating or erupting gradually at the workplace. Sometimes you can easily see it bursting out. Sometimes it takes a while. It takes a while to be able to identify. Okay, the symptoms here we can see withholding information. Okay, or usually you could see when there are hostility and jealousy between groups, it could lead to it is a sign of conflict at the workplace. Okay, problems, even trivial ones, which are being passed up the hierarchy because no one wants to take responsibility for them, is a sign of conflict. Trivial issues, and you see somebody writing to the CEO. Again, poor communication channels up and down the hierarchy and between departments. You hear it only through the grapevine. That is a sign of conflict. Okay, widespread frustration and dissatisfaction among the organizational folks tells you that something is wrong. Anything somebody raises up, somebody will criticize. Be careful. Again, when we have problems constantly being polarized around people, it's the finance guys who are doing this, it's the HR guys who are doing that. And we don't want to accept it as a general organizational issue. It is a sign of conflict. Okay? So look at this: office politics, fault finding, empire building, clique building, distorting information, withholding information, trivial issues being passed up and down. These are signs of conflict in the organization. Okay. What are causes of conflict? A lot. We can mention them as you can see from the list over there. We have horizontal conflict, vertical conflict. I will just pick them together. Okay. So talk of history. Okay, causes could be history. If conflicts have a tendency of being self-perpetuating. We see it happening historically. It is something we could easily look at and fix it. When there are differences, okay, differences in goals, differences in culture, okay, of interest, of objectives, of priorities, of ideologies, differences. These are those who cause conflict, okay. When we have limited resources, scarcity of resources at the workplace, there may be battle for what is available. We all want to pounce on the little to satisfy ourselves. When there is a win-lose situation, it is not the best. I want to lose. Sorry, I want to win so that my colleague will lose. It will cause conflict at the workplace. Okay. Interdependencies. It should actually lead to a positive sign. But if I know my output will become your input and I want to sabotage your work, I'll delay my output. Okay. So here we see relationships, responsibilities, and boundaries not clearly defined. Somebody not doing his work fairly. So at the end of the day, since I know my colleague depends on me, I'll sabotage his work. Okay. Again, when we talk of, we could also have misunderstandings. Okay. Misunderstandings include failure, communication failures. Okay. So where we talk of if this already exists in the workplace, then of course it is a clear cause of conflict, but it could also even result in threats, some sort of threats. Misunderstand each other and we are not careful, the next time it will be fisticuffs in the workplace. Conviction beliefs are also one causes of conflict. So if one group is convinced of their essential rightness, of goodness, then there may be tendencies to enlighten others, causing resistance. I always think I'm always right. The others are not right. It will cause conflict. Don't think you know best than everyone. So when I have that conviction belief that I'm the best, the rest don't know, it will cause conflict. Stress and failure. If an individual, a group, or the organization feels unable to cope with pressure and problems, then it will degenerate to fault finding, reality denial, and some irrational acts. Okay, so be careful. When you are stressed, take a rest. When you fail somewhere, it doesn't mean that's the end. Perhaps there's something wrong, you need to fix it. Okay, change is also one point which causes people to revolt, leads to conflict. Okay, people sometimes don't want to change. They don't want to adapt to the new relationships, the new responsibilities assigned to them, the new workplace ethos or culture. It will lead to what? Conflict. All right. So boundaries of authority, set the boundaries. Somebody doesn't want to be given an authority, want to bypass. When there's so much uncertainty in what I do, ambiguity in my roles, I could trespass and step on somebody's role. And when you usurp somebody's responsibility, it could cause conflict. Okay. When the reward system is not fair, we are all on the same scale as lecturers, yet you end up paying me lower than somebody who just came in. Why? For some unreasonable reasons. It could cause conflict. Okay. And the vertical approach, power. Okay, power up there. Thinks he knows everything. He's got the power. He can wield it. Resource distribution not fairly done. Alienation, cutting off some people, more or less putting them as if they are inferior, clashing of objectives not well cut out could lead to conflict in the workplace. Okay, when you take your book, okay, I mentioned a number of causes of conflict, but when you go into your book, actually, what we see over here, you could find a number of them types of horizontal conflict, okay, and types of vertical conflict. Okay, you find more on horizontal conflict and you find more on vertical conflict. I'll leave you to take a good look at that one. All right. Now, another way to look at conflict is through the organizational politics. Remember, politics plays at every angle in the workplace. You must just play it clean. That's all. Play the politics in such a way that you meet your interest whilst not compromising somebody's interest. We all have limited resources at the workplace. We all have our roles and responsibilities we need to discharge. How do I do this without stepping on the toes of someone? So if you take a good look, Thomas Kilman conflict mode instrument, TKI, gave us a very beautiful grade where he's looking at cooperativeness and assertiveness and the importance of the relationship, importance of the issue. When we merge it, what do we get? Okay, so Kilman, the TKI, I'll just the Thomas Kilman model. So the TKI conflict mode instrument is looking at two dimensions, like I said, degree of assertiveness in pursuit of one's own personal interest, okay, and then the level of cooperation in attempting to satisfy others' interest. So the assertiveness with which I pursue to achieve my personal interest and how I cooperate with others for them to also satisfy their interest. These two. Okay. Now the strength of each of these in a particular situation can suggest the ways that conflict can be resolved. Okay, the first grade at the top. Okay, the competing, high assertiveness, low cooperation. That's a competing one. So here, when we have the high assertive, low cooperation, the goal is to win. High assertive, I just want to win. Okay. Now, both or all parties will seek to maximize their own interests and goals. They don't cooperate. I want to win. Okay. And so we get winners, we get losers. Okay. And it causes damage to to the organization or one of the parties. That is it. Not a good position. Okay. And then we have low assertiveness, low cooperation. Yeah. We call it the avoiding grade. Okay. The goal is to delay. I want to delay mine, I'll delay yours. Okay? One or more of the parties want to ignore or suppress the conflict. They want to ignore the conflict. It is there, but they want to ignore or suppress it. Delay. All right. Then we have the collaborating, high assertiveness, high cooperating. Okay. So at this point, we find a win-win solution. It's a good point. We want a win-win solution. So it is achieved through joint confrontation because I have a high assertiveness to get my interests met, whilst I'm cooperating with you on a very high level to get your interests also met. Okay. And we use problem solving techniques to create creative solutions. Beautiful approach. I'll go for collaborating. Okay. I'll go for collaborating. And then we have low assertiveness and high cooperating. That's interesting. That's the sacrificial guys, right? Low assertiveness to meet it, but he's cooperating high on the other end for the people to win. That's lovely. That's accommodating, okay? So this is what we call the yield. One party will put his interest at stake and try to satisfy the other person's interest first. That should be what the religious bodies will preach, right? Servant leadership. Sacrifice yours, let somebody win. Seek the interests of others first before yours. Is that not it? That's what we say in terms of accommodating. But in the middle ground, where we find the middle ground is what we call the compromising. Compromising. So here we have moderate assertiveness. It is not high. It is not low. And we have moderate cooperativeness. It is not high. It is not low. Negotiations will come in. Each party will bring what he has. We all try to meet each other halfway. And then what will happen? The problem in each party may lose something, but still we all get a better alternative. That's the best. If you don't want to be collaborating and accommodating, we want to say go for compromise. Okay. All right. I'll go for collaborating as a win-win situation. If I can't, I'll count for compromising before I go for accommodating. In real life, this is what you see being orchestrated in the workplace. Okay. Now, conflict management strategies are a lot. Okay. Now, if you take a very good look from Hachinsky and Buchanan, 2001, their article, they give a lot of information there. Okay. So there are four main strategies that we could always use in terms of what? Managing conflict. Okay. So one, we have what we call the suppression. More or less, it's like they are playing down on the conflict. Okay. Suppression, conflict suppression. And then we have the conflict reduction. Okay. And then we have the conflict resolution. Then we have stimulation and orchestration. Okay. Now, suppression deals with the use, conflict suppression strategy deals with the use or threatened use of authority or force, or the avoidance of recognition that a conflict situation exists. So they try to write it off. I use my authority to write it off. They try to wink at it and think it's not existing. Okay. So here, what they are trying to look at is to smooth the conflict, smoothing it out by de-emphasizing the seriousness of the situation. That is suppression. Okay. No, so such strategies are usually short term. These things could come up again. So it happens where tensions are heightened, people are hot, they want to just show their powers, and somebody comes in and tries to use his power to write it off as if it is not serious. Then we have conflict reduction, where we build on areas of agreement, okay, common objectives, changing attitude, perceptions of the parties. We all come together, we build techniques to compromise, to concede our positions, and usually it looks like compromise, come to a census where we all get some reconciliation, arbitration. Sometimes we use third parties to help in resolving this in terms of reduction. And the conflict resolution, where we eliminate the root causes of the conflict, okay, by establishing a consensus. Find what is causing it, get it out, and let it be a win-win situation. Stimulation and orchestration is an approach actively used to encourage conflict as a means of generating new ideas, okay, and approaches. It is used to stimulate change. So more or less, we fuel it, let it happen. Let us see what will come up, okay? So, of course, there are dangers when you want to generate conflict. They could escalate in destructive ways, okay? People could be threatened and so on and so forth. But sometimes some conflict is necessary to prevent organizations being fixed and not willing to change. So this is a situation where we orchestrate it, we manipulate it. There's some machinations at the background that will cause conflict to erupt so that we can change. Okay. Now, Handy had two strategies in terms of resolving it. Okay. Mainwaring had four strategies, and you can find it in the text. Okay. But Handy has two strategies. So Mainwaring had these four, and Handy has two strategies. Okay. So here he's talking of environmental and ecological. I will just leave that one briefly. Okay. I'm just considering my time. So I'll give you this task. Look at how these two strategies to managing conflict, the environmental, ecological, and then the regulatory, where we leverage on regulations available at the workplace. Okay. Industrial relations. In any organization, we always want to participate in some industrial relations, don't we? Yes, we do want to participate, okay, in industrial relations. It's very important. It helps a lot, okay? At the end of the day, what do we need? Industrial relations will cover all the rules, practices, conventions, okay, governing interaction between management and their workforces. Industrial relations has four main approaches: adversarial, okay, where organization decide what it wants to happen and it imposes it, okay. The only thing that will come up from this adversarial situation is rebellion. It's the only possible outcome in such situations. Then we have the traditional industrial relation approach, in which case we talk of working relationship is good. Issues are led by management, trade unions coming to respond where there are situations. Okay, it's more like a parent-child approach. Okay, it's likely to blow up at some point in time when things don't work out. Remember, parents and children can also always fight. Then we have partnership approach to industrial relations, where employees get involved in drawing up policies, but management will still enforce. Okay, get them involved, get everyone involved. Then we have power sharing scenario, where employees take part in strategic and day-to-day decision making. All right. The level of unionization is very important in every workplace. We all have to take part. We all join unions as lecturers. Okay, and it gives different approaches. Here we're looking at union approaches like avoidance strategies, where we talk of double breasting, set up new plans in areas of high unemployment or low union activity. Okay, so devolve collective bargaining to factory level, remove unions from annual pay rounds whilst giving the right of the union members to be consulted and represented. Avoidance, okay? Union avoidance strategies. Then we have the individualistic approach, okay? And then we have the The collective bargaining, which we all know, use procedures, methods, formats, lead to substantive agreement, define what each person is entitled to in terms of rewards and responsibilities. Okay, and then individual approach away from third party involvement using appraisal systems, talk of training. So that's the HR approach. Let me put it that way. So more of use the appraisal system, training development scheme, performance related pay schemes. Okay, very important. And then we have the cooperative, that's the collective bargaining. All right. So I'll leave it here, friends. And at this stage, I will say take a very good look at the whole chapter 7 and 8. Okay. I've posted a question, tutorial question there. But again, if you go to page 303 of the 2021 2021 text, there's a good book there, a good question there in the book, sorry, a good question there, which talks of discussing the causes of conflict within an organization and discussing how each type of conflict could be resolved. Very important. Take a look at it, and that should serve the purpose for this particular segment. All right, friends, we'll leave it here. We'll leave it here. Sorry, this session went beyond. It's almost 43 minutes, but I believe you can always take your time and watch it and study on your own. See you soon, and thanks for now. Bye.